Hi folks, my name is Victor, and in this video I want to show you Annex, a set of extensible dev tools for Monorepos that help you develop like Google, Facebook and Microsoft. We'll start by creating a new Annex workspace. We'll give it a name, which usually corresponds to the name of the org or the company or the team, and then we will select what the workspace will contain. In our case, it will be a single React app. We get a workspace with two folders. The first one is the tickets application itself, and the second one is the set of end-to-end tests written using Cypress. Annex uses tools like Webpack, Jest, and Cypress to actually build and test your applications. But it provides a unified, toolable command line interface on top of those tools, which is very important, but we won't go into too much detail right now about how it works. I'll just show you that you can serve your application by running Annex serve. And this is the starter app that's been generated. And you can test your application by running Annex test. All right, let's write an end-to-end test for our application. In the interest of time, I'm not going to go into too much detail about how Cypress works, how to write a good end-to-end test. Instead, I'm going to write a sketch, like a sketch of a good end-to-end test. I'm going to define two helpers, one to get the list of tickets displayed on the page, and the other one to get the button that I will use to add a new ticket. And then I'm going to use those two helpers to write a very basic end-to-end test. I will assume that there are two tickets displayed by default, and if I click on the button, another ticket appears. And if I run the end-to-end test right now, it will predictably fail. Now let's open the main component of our application and sketch out the simplest implementation we can imagine that will make our end-to-end test pass. And it does. All right, so at this point, we've built a React application, and it's good that we were able to use Cypress and TypeScript in a very transparent way to do it, but it's not that interesting. To make it a little bit more interesting, let's add a backend for our frontend. And again, there are a lot of tools in the React ecosystem that are fantastic tools for building full-stack apps. What's different about Annex is that it's not just a tool for building a full-stack app. It's a tool that you can use to build multiple front-ends and multiple back-ends in the same workspace. They all can share code. You can interact with all of them in the same way, right? So in other words, you can build a variety of front-ends, say using the micro front-ends architecture, that talk to a set of APIs that you maintain all in the same workspace. All right, let's show how it works by building a small API using Express. The main reason I'm using Express here is because everyone knows how Express works. Annex is actually agnostic to the backend framework you use to implement your API, so you can use whatever you want. It will work in the same fashion. To be able to use Express, I need to add the capability that will add some code generators and the builders that I can use to run my Express application. Now with this in place, I can use the Annex generate command to invoke the Express app generator, or as we call it, Express app schematic, to add a new backend application to this workspace. But before doing that, I will pass --help just to see what flags and schematics the generator supports. And the one I'm interested in is front-end project. So I'm going to pass it to configure the proxy to make the dev experience nicer. As you can see, the API is in the same folder with our front-end and our end-to-end test project. Let's open the main file of our API and sketch out the implementation. It looks good. Let's update the front end. To run the app, we need to serve the API and serve the front end. What we have right now works, it's great, but there is a problem. We have two copies of the ticket interface, one on the front end and one on the back end. This means that in the long run, in half a year, in a year, those interfaces will diverge, inevitably. And that means that runtime errors will creep in, and that's a problem. So we need to share that interface. In NX, you do it by creating a library. So as I said before, an app in NX is something that is runnable. It can be a front-end project, it can be a back-end project, it can be an end-to-end test project. A library is not runnable. It's just a piece of code with a well-defined public API. And that API, public API, cannot be broken. Right? It's statically verified. You only depend on the public API. And you can use a library in another library or in an application. Let's create a simple TypeScript library. You can call it data. Once we run the generator, the library will appear in a libs folder in our workspace. And now let's move the ticket interface definition from our app to the library, and then import the library into both the front end and the back end. As you can see with NX, it's very easy to share code across your applications. That's fantastic in itself. That's a great thing. But that's not the main reason why people love NX. The main reason is that NX actually understands how your workspace is wired up. And you can see it by running the debgraph command. I will show you why it's a big deal in a second. But prior to that, let's add another library to make our workspace a little bit more interesting. This time it will be a library of React components. And I want to quickly show you another cool feature of NX, is that if I pass dry run to the generator, to the schematic, I'm going to see what NX will update without actually touching the disk. Let's move the component over. Let's check that the application still works. And finally, look at the dev graph again. All right, cool. So now to make things a bit more real world-like, imagine we have a separate team who is working on a companion app for our tickets app, right? And they're using web components. They decided not to do React. Let's sketch it out by creating a new web app. And as you can see, Annex generated the app itself and a suite of end-to-end tests using Cypress. Let's open the app and update the component. We can run the two apps side by side and they do work. That's fantastic. Now let's run the depth graph again. We can see again that Annex understands the structure of workspace. And that's what makes Annex a fantastic tool for Monorepos, a much better tool than say Learner. With this understanding, Annex can rebuild and retest only what's affected by your change. Right? It's a very simple property that is fundamental for any monorepo-like setup. So let me show you how it works. I'll make a small change to the agent app and run a different command. Instead of depth graph, I'll run affected : depth graph. And as you can see, Annex highlighted the project that can be affected by my change. Now if I run affected apps, I will see a list of apps that are affected by my change. And if I run affected test, Annex will run unit tests for all the projects affected by my change. Next, I will touch the ticket list library. And as you can see, Annex knows that the ticket list library and the tickets app are affected by this change. And if I run affected test, Annex will retest both of them. And if I touch the data library, everything will be affected and will have to be retested. This capability is general. You can use it to rerun end-to-end tests in the same fashion, rebuild applications in the same fashion, or even run your custom targets. You can also pass some extra parameters such as running all of it in parallel, which can be useful in CI. Alright, let's recap. Annex is a set of extensible dev tools for Monorepos. With Annex, you can develop in a way that's similar to Google, Facebook, and Microsoft. You can use the same set of commands to build, serve, and test your applications. You can share code between your applications, between front ends and back ends, with ease. You can rebuild and retest only what's affected by your change. That's the most fundamental property of a monorepo-like setup. If you rebuild and retest everything, your repo won't scale beyond a handful of projects maintained by a single team. The moment you have another team, you won't be able to rebuild and retest everything because suddenly you might be affected by some flaky task created by that team, and that's not what you want. And there is a lot more to Annex that I didn't show in this video. For example, you can impose constraints on the dependency graph. You can say that libraries created by one team cannot depend on private libraries created by another one. Or you can create code generators that are organization specific, so you can promote best practices within your organization, right, in a very transparent and structured way. If it sounds interesting, read more at annex.dev.